I think it's time we stop pretending.
Don't look away from me when I am
Lauren
talking
said,
to you.
setting her
Your
fork down
silence
with a
is
sharp
exactly
clink.
the problem here.
You're not just visiting anymore, Ryan.
Burden.
You're a burden.
Burden.
The word hung in the air like something rotten. I looked at my son, Ethan, just waiting for him to say something. But he didn't. He kept his eyes on his plate. I nodded slowly, as if I agreed. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Thick paper, gold seal. A university I hadn't spoken to in decades. I read it alone in my room, and for the first time in years, I smiled. They had no idea who I really was. If this story made you feel something, I'd love for you to share it. Like the video, subscribe if you believe people deserve respect at any age, and tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Your voice matters more than you think. After my husband passed away, the house felt too large for just one person. Too quiet. Too full of memories that didn't know how to fade. Ethan was the one who suggested I move in. "It just makes sense, Mom," he had said over the phone, his voice careful, practical. "You shouldn't be alone. We have the space." At the time, I believed him. I remember packing my things, slowly folding each piece of my life into boxes that seemed smaller than the years they carried. 46 years of marriage reduced to labeled cardboard kitchen bedroom photos documents. I kept my husband's watch in my purse. I didn't trust myself to let it out of sight. The day I arrived at Ethan's house, Lauren greeted me at the door with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ryan," she said, "not Mom, not even Mrs. Caldwell. Just my name, flat and distant." I told myself not to read into it. People express warmth in different ways, I thought. Not everyone is demonstrative. "Come in," she added, stepping aside. The house was beautiful, modern, clean lines, white walls, everything arranged as if it belonged in a magazine. It didn't feel like a home yet, but I assumed that would come with time. Ethan carried in my suitcases, chatting about work traffic, anything but the fact that I was now living with them permanently. Lauren led me upstairs. "We've set up the guest room for you," she said. Guest room. I paused for a moment, just a moment, but enough for her to notice. "It's more comfortable than the smaller room downstairs," she added quickly. "And it's closer to the bathroom." I nodded. "Thank you." The room was neat, neutral. A bed, a dresser, a small lamp. No personal touches. No sense that I would be staying longer than a weekend. Still, I placed my suitcase gently at the foot of the bed, as if I were afraid to disturb something. That first night, I lay awake longer than I expected. Not because the bed was uncomfortable, it wasn't, but because everything felt temporary, like I was waiting to be asked when I would leave. The first few weeks passed quietly. I woke up early, as I always had. Old habits don't disappear with age. I made coffee before anyone else came downstairs, moving carefully, trying not to make too much noise in someone else's kitchen. At first, I tried to be helpful. I washed dishes after dinner, folded laundry when I saw it left in the basket, wiped down counters without being asked. "Thank you," Lauren would say sometimes, but it was always the same tone, polite, controlled, measured. Not warm. Never warm. Gradually, things began to shift. Small things at first. One morning, I noticed a note taped to the refrigerator. "Please rinse dishes before putting them in the sink." I stared at it longer than I should have. I had already been doing that, but I said nothing. Another day, Lauren stopped me as I was about to start the washing machine. "Oh, Ryan," she said, "I usually separate colors and fabrics a certain way. It's just easier if I handle the laundry. Easier." The word lingered in my mind. Easier for whom? So I stepped back. "Of course," I said. Then came the living room. I had been sitting there one afternoon reading a book when Lauren walked in. "Oh, were you using this space?" she asked. I looked up confused. "I was just reading." She smiled, but there was something behind it. "I usually have a virtual meeting here around this time. The lighting is better." "Of course," I said again, closing my book. I moved back to my room. After that, I spent more time there. Ethan noticed at least a little. "You okay, Mom?" he asked one evening. We were alone in the kitchen. Lauren had stepped out to take a call. "I'm fine," I said, giving him a small smile. "You've been quieter." "I'm just adjusting." He nodded, as if that explanation was enough. It always was. Ethan had always been like that. Gentle, but not confrontational. Kind, but not strong when it mattered. When he was younger, I used to step in for him. Now I realized there was no one stepping in for me. Lauren's rules became clearer over time. Dinner was at 6:30 sharp. Breakfast was self-serve, but cleanup had to be immediate. The thermostat stayed at a fixed temperature. Lights off in unused rooms. I followed everything. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to be a problem. Still, no matter how careful I was, I could feel it. The subtle shift in the air when I entered a room. The way conversations paused for half a second too long. The glances exchanged between Ethan and Lauren when they thought I wasn't looking. One evening I overheard them in the living room. I hadn't meant to listen. I was just passing by. "We need to talk about this," Lauren said, her voice low but firm. "About what?" Ethan replied. "About how long this is going to be." A pause. "She's my mother," he said. "I know that. But this isn't sustainable." I stood frozen in the hallway. "I'm already adjusting everything," Lauren continued. "The space, the routine, the expenses." Expenses. The word landed heavily. "I'm not saying she has to leave," she added quickly, "but we need boundaries." Boundaries? I stepped away quietly before I could hear more. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap. For a long time, I didn't move. I had spent my life building a family, sacrificing, working, giving, and now I was something to be managed, contained, measured. I looked around the room, the neutral walls, the temporary furniture, the absence of anything that truly belonged to me. And for the first time, I allowed myself to admit something I had been avoiding. This wasn't my home. Not really. I was just staying here. And the longer I stayed, the more I could feel it slipping. My place, my voice, my worth. But even then, even in that quiet moment of realization, I didn't say anything. I didn't confront Lauren. I didn't push Ethan. I didn't defend myself. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. Something I had carried for years. Something I wasn't ready to reveal. Not yet. It didn't happen all at once. That would have been easier to understand, easier to defend against. Know the way Lauren began to treat me. It crept in slowly like a draft under a door you didn't realize was open. At first, it was just small requests. "Ryan, could you wipe down the counters again? I think there's still some grease." I had already cleaned them, but I nodded anyway. "Of course." Then it became assumptions. "Can you take out the trash today, since you're home anyway?" "Ryan, could you wipe down the counters again? I think there's still some grease." I had already cleaned them, but I nodded anyway. "Of course." Then it became assumptions. "Can you take out the trash today, since you're home anyway?" Since you're home, as if being home meant being available, as if my time, whatever I chose to do with it, had no value. Still, I said nothing. I had raised a son. I had managed a household. I had worked jobs that demanded more from me than most people would ever know. And yet, in that house, I was reduced to someone who needed to prove she was useful. So I tried. I folded towels neatly the way I always had. I organized the pantry once thinking it might help. Lauren stood there afterward, arms crossed. I had a system, she said. I'm sorry, I replied quickly. I thought, it's fine, she cut in. Just ask next time. Ask. For permission. I nodded again. The tone changed next. Subtle at first, then sharper. One afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table going through some old papers I had brought with me, documents I hadn't looked at in years. Bank statements, receipts, letters. Pieces of a life that no longer existed in the same way. Lauren walked in, glanced at the stack, and paused. That looks like a lot, she said. It's just old paperwork, I replied. She stepped closer, picking up one of the envelopes before I could stop her. You still have accounts? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Some, I said carefully. She set the paper down, her expression shifting into something down. Her expression shifting into something I couldn't quite name. You know, Ethan and I handle all the household expenses now, she said. It would probably be easier if everything was just centralized. Thing I couldn't quite name. You know, Ethan and I handle all the household expenses now, she said. It would probably be easier if everything was just centralized. Centralized. I folded my hands together. I don't want to complicate things, she continued. It's just about transparency. There was that word again. Transparency. As if I were hiding something. I understand, I said quietly. But I didn't explain anything. Not then. The first time I heard her really say it, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. She was on the phone. I was upstairs in my room, but the door wasn't fully closed. Her voice carried just enough through the hallway. I mean, she's nice, but it's like having an extra bill that never goes away, Lauren said with a short laugh. You know, a permanent expense. I froze. There was a pause as if the person on the other end had said something. Lauren laughed again. Exactly. A financial dead weight. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were loud, but because they were said so easily, so casually, as if I weren't a person, just a cost. I sat there on the edge of my bed, my hands resting on my knees, and for a moment, I couldn't move. I thought about all the years I had worked, all the sacrifices I had made, all the times I had gone without so Ethan could have more. And now? This was how I was seen. That evening at dinner, nothing was said directly, but everything felt different. Lauren served the food with her usual efficiency, placing plates down without much eye contact. Ethan talked about work, about a client, about numbers and projections. I listened, nodded when appropriate, played my role. But inside, something had shifted. Something quiet. Something steady. A few days later, Lauren made it official. Ryan, can we talk for a moment? She asked one morning. I was in the kitchen again making tea. Of course. She sat across from me, her posture straight, her expression composed. I think it would be helpful if we clarified a few things, she began. Clarified. I waited. Living arrangements, expectations, that kind of thing. I folded my hands around my cup. I don't want there to be any misunderstandings, she continued. This is our home, and we just want to make sure everything runs smoothly. Our home. The words were gentle, but the message was clear. I appreciate you letting me stay here, I said. She gave a small nod, as if that was the correct answer. So, moving forward, she said, we'd like you to contribute where you can. Of course, I said again. Things like helping out around the house, being mindful of utilities, keeping shared spaces clean. She listed them like bullet points. Measured, controlled, professional, like a contract. And financially, she added, we can discuss a small contribution, just to keep things fair. Fair? I looked at her for a moment. Really looked at her. At the confidence in her voice, at the certainty in her posture, at the complete absence of doubt. She truly believed this was reasonable, that I was someone who needed to justify my presence. I understand, I said, and I meant it, not the way she thought, but in a deeper, quieter way. I understood exactly how she saw me. Ethan didn't say much during that conversation. He stood by the counter, leaning slightly, his arms crossed, watching, listening, but not intervening. Mom, he said at one point, as if checking to see if I was upset. I'm fine, I replied, and again he accepted that, because it was easier. That night, I went back to my room earlier than usual. I sat at the small desk by the window and opened the drawer where I had placed the letter. The one with the gold seal, Westbridge University. My fingers traced the edge of the envelope before I pulled it out. I had read it several times already, but each time it felt different, heavier, more significant, as if it carried not just words, but years, decades. A life that existed long before this house, before Lauren, before even Ethan in some ways. I unfolded the letter slowly. Dear Ms. Caldwell. The words blurred slightly as my eyes moved across the page. Recognition, gratitude, honor. Words I had never needed before. Words I had never asked for. And yet here they were. Waiting. I folded the letter again carefully and placed it back in the drawer. Then I closed it, softly, deliberately. Downstairs, I could hear Lauren moving around the kitchen, Ethan's voice faint, coming from the living room. Life continuing, unaware. I sat there in the quiet of my room, my hands resting in my lap, and I allowed myself a small, almost invisible smile. Not of satisfaction, not of revenge, but of certainty. They saw me as something temporary, something expendable, something that needed to be managed. But soon, they would see the truth. Not because I would tell them, but because it would be impossible not to. And when that moment came, everything would change. It happened on a Thursday evening. I remember that because Thursdays had always been quiet in this house. No guests, no rushed dinners. Just the three of us at the table moving through the routine Lauren had carefully constructed. Dinner was already set when I came downstairs. Roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, a glass of water placed precisely beside each plate. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt tense. Lauren was already seated, scrolling through something on her phone. Ethan walked in just behind me, loosening his tie, looking tired but distracted. I took my usual seat. No one spoke at first. The only sound was the soft clink of utensils against plates. I kept my eyes on my food, cutting slowly, carefully, as if precision could somehow keep the evening steady. But I could feel it. That pressure in the air, the kind that builds before something breaks. Lauren was the one who broke it. I've been thinking, she said, setting her fork down. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Ethan glanced up. About what? She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on me. About our situation. My hands paused. I didn't look up immediately. I already knew, somewhere deep inside, I had known this moment was coming. What about it? Ethan asked, though his tone carried a hint of hesitation. Lauren took a breath. I don't think we can keep pretending this is working. There it was. Clear. Direct. Unavoidable. I slowly placed my fork down and lifted my gaze. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. Lauren leaned back slightly, folding her hands together on the table. "I mean this arrangement," she said. "It's not sustainable." Ethan shifted in his seat. "Lauren," he started, but she raised a hand gently. "No, we need to be honest," she said. "Honest. That word again." She turned fully toward me now. "Ryan, you've been here for a while," she continued, "and we've tried to make it work." Tried. The implication was clear, and failed. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. She nodded as if acknowledging a polite formality. "But the reality is," she went on, "this isn't just about space or routines anymore." I felt my chest tighten slightly. It's about balance. Balance. Another word carefully chosen. Another word that made it sound reasonable. Fair. As if this were a simple equation that needed correcting. "I'm not sure I understand," I said. Lauren's expression didn't change. "It's financial," she said plainly. The word landed heavier than anything else she had said. Ethan looked down at his plate. "Everything has a cost," Lauren continued. "Utilities, groceries, maintenance, and those costs have gone up." I sat still, listening, absorbing. "You're part of this household now," she said, "which means you contribute to those costs." There was no accusation in her tone, no anger, just certainty, as if she were explaining something obvious, something I should have already understood. "I see," I said. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, calm, almost detached. Lauren studied me for a moment, perhaps expecting resistance. When none came, she continued. And beyond that, she added, "There's the issue of space." Space. I glanced around the dining area as if seeing it for the first time. The clean lines, the carefully arranged furniture, nothing out of place, nothing extra. "I've had to adjust my work setup," Lauren said. "My routines, even how I use certain rooms." I nodded slowly. "I didn't realize." "It's not about blame," she interrupted gently. "It's about reality." Reality. That word felt colder than the rest. Ethan finally spoke. "Maybe we can figure something out," he said, his voice uncertain. "A compromise." Lauren looked at him briefly, then back at me. Looked at him briefly, then back at me. "That's exactly what I'm trying to do," she said. Then she leaned forward slightly. "And part of that is being honest about the fact that we can't keep carrying this situation indefinitely." "That's exactly what I'm trying to do," she said. Then she leaned forward slightly. "And part of that is being honest about the fact that we can't keep carrying this situation indefinitely." Carrying. The word echoed in my mind. Carrying. As if I were something heavy, something burdensome, something that required effort just to exist. I felt a small, almost imperceptible shift inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. "So, what are you suggesting?" I asked. Lauren didn't hesitate. "I'm suggesting we set clearer boundaries," she said. "Financially, structurally, and long-term." "And long-term," I repeated. She nodded. "We need to have a plan," she said. "Because this," she gestured lightly around the room, "this can't be permanent." There it was. The truth stripped of all its careful wording. I was temporary, unwanted, a situation to be resolved. I looked at Ethan, just for a moment, hoping perhaps foolishly that he would say something different, something stronger, something that would remind me that I was more than this. But he didn't. He met my eyes briefly, then looked away. "I think we all just want what's best," he said quietly. "What's best? For whom?" I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. And I did. More than they realized. Lauren seemed almost relieved by my response. "I'm glad," she said, "because I don't want this to turn into something uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. I almost smiled at that, as if it hadn't already crossed that line long ago. The rest of the dinner passed in silence. Not the usual quiet. This was different, heavier, final. Later that night, I sat alone in my room. The house was still. Lauren and Ethan had gone to bed. The hallway lights were off. Only the soft glow of my lamp filled the space around me. I opened the drawer again, took out the letter, held it in my hands for a long moment before unfolding it. Ryan Caldwell. The words felt steadier now, stronger. Not because they had changed, but because I had. Downstairs, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the quiet rhythm of a house that believed everything was under control, that everything had been decided. I traced the edge of the paper with my finger, then folded it carefully once more. They thought they had defined my place, reduced it, measured it. But they were wrong. Not because I needed to prove them wrong, not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth didn't depend on their understanding. I placed the letter back in the drawer and closed it. Then I turned off the lamp, and in the darkness, I allowed myself a single quiet thought. Just wait. The letter arrived in the late afternoon. I remember the light was soft that day, filtering through the front windows in a way that made everything look calmer than it really was. Lauren had gone out something about meeting a client, and Ethan was still at work. The house was quiet, almost peaceful. For a moment, it felt like it used to, before everything became measured, controlled, temporary. I heard the knock at the door and made my way slowly down the hallway. When I opened it, the mail carrier stood there, holding a small stack of envelopes. "Afternoon," he said with a friendly nod. "Good afternoon," I replied. He handed me the mail, but one envelope stood out immediately. Thicker than the rest, cream-colored paper, a gold-embossed seal pressed firmly into the corner. Even before I read the name, I knew. My fingers tightened slightly around it. "Have a good one," he added before walking away. "You too," I said softly, though my attention was already elsewhere. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, just holding the envelope. The house felt different all of a sudden, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves were waiting. I turned it over slowly. Westbridge University. The name alone carried decades with it. Memories I had carefully folded away. Years I had chosen not to revisit. My name was written neatly across the front, Ryan Caldwell, not Mrs. Caldwell, not occupant, just my name, clear, direct, recognized. I walked back to the kitchen and sat down at the table, the same table where just nights before I had been told I was a burden. The envelope rested in front of me. For a moment, I didn't open it. I simply looked at it, tracing the edges with my fingers, feeling the weight of it, not just the paper, but what it represented. A past I had kept hidden, a truth no one in this house had ever asked about. Slowly, I slid my finger beneath the seal and opened it, carefully, deliberately, as if I were afraid of what might spill out if I moved too quickly. Inside was a letter, formal, elegant, the kind of paper you don't throw away. I unfolded it gently. Dear Ms. Caldwell. My eyes moved down the page, and with each line, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, like a quiet tide rising. We are honored to invite you to attend a special recognition ceremony. My Hana special recognition ceremony. My Han D tightened slightly. In acknowledgement of your lifelong contributions, I closed my eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Then I kept reading. As one of Westbridge University's most dedicated and enduring benefactors tightened slightly. In acknowledgement of your lifelong contributions, I closed my eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Then I kept reading. As one of Westbridge University's most dedicated and enduring benefactors, the word sat there on the page. Benefactor, not donor, not supporter. Benefactor. It was a word I had never needed anyone else to say. A word I had lived quietly without recognition. Until now. Your impact has shaped the lives of countless students. Images flickered in my mind. Faces I had never met in person. Letters I had received over the years. Stories of young men and women who had been given a chance I had once wished someone had given me. We would be privileged to honor you at this year's ceremony. I lowered the paper slowly. The kitchen felt different now. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. I sat there for a long time, the letter resting in my hands, thinking. Not about Lauren, not about Ethan, but about everything that had led me here. I hadn't planned for this, not the recognition, not the ceremony, and certainly not the timing. For years I had made my contributions quietly, anonymous, unseen, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't need to be seen. I had lived enough of my life proving things to others. I didn't need to prove this, not to anyone, but now. The world had decided to speak, and I couldn't ignore it. The sound of the front door opening pulled me back. Lauren's voice carried into the hallway. I'm home. I folded the letter quickly, slipping it back into the envelope. Not out of fear, but out of instinct. Some things weren't meant to be shared casually. Ryan, she called out. In the kitchen, I replied. She walked in a moment later, setting her bag down on the counter. Her eyes landed on the stack of mail. Anything important, she asked, already sorting through it. Just the usual, I said. She flipped through the envelopes, barely glancing at me. Bills, advertisements, nothing that interested her. When she reached the cream-colored envelope, she paused for half a second. Then she set it aside, unopened, unquestioned. I watched her for a moment. How easily she dismissed it. How quickly she decided what mattered. What's this one? She asked, holding up another envelope. Just paperwork, I said. She nodded and moved on. Just like that, the moment passed. Later that evening, Ethan came home. Dinner was quieter than usual. Not tense, just distant. Lauren talked about her day. Ethan listened. I sat there, the envelope still in my mind, tucked away, but present. At one point, Ethan looked at me. You okay, Mom? He asked. I met his eyes. I'm fine, I said, and this time, I meant it differently. That night, I returned to my room earlier than usual. I closed the door behind me and walked to the desk. The envelope was still there, waiting. I sat down and opened it again, reading the letter once more, slower this time, letting each word settle, letting each sentence remind me of something I had almost forgotten. Who I was, what I had done, what I still carried. By the time I reached the end, my hands were steady. My thoughts were clear. There was a date listed, a time, a place. Westbridge University Hall. Formal attire requested. I looked at my reflection in the small mirror across the room. The same woman Lauren saw every day. The same woman who had been called a burden. But now I saw something else. Not pride, not arrogance, just truth. A truth that had been quiet for too long. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I opened the drawer and set it inside. Not hidden, not anymore, just waiting. Because soon it wouldn't matter whether I told them or not. Soon, the truth would stand on its own. And when it did, there would be no room left for misunderstanding. No space for quiet dismissal. No way to pretend I was something less than I had always been. I turned off the light and lay down. The house was silent, but for the first time since I had moved in, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel temporary. I didn't feel like something that needed to be justified. I felt certain. And sometimes, certainty is louder than anything you could ever say. There was a time when I didn't have the luxury of being quiet. A time when every day demanded something from me. Strength, endurance, sacrifice, and there was no space to step back and question it. I was 22 when I married Thomas Caldwell. He was brilliant, ambitious, the kind of man who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. And I believed in him, not blindly, but completely. Back then, we had very little. A small apartment with peeling paint and a heater that worked only when it felt like it. We shared everything, meals, dreams, worries, and somehow that made it feel like enough. Thomas had been accepted into Westbridge University. That was the beginning of everything. It was also the beginning of the sacrifices. You don't have to do this alone. I remember telling him the night before his first semester. He shook his head. I won't, he said. I have you. At the time, I didn't realize what that truly meant. I took my first job at a diner just 2 blocks from our apartment. Early mornings, late nights, endless cups of coffee and conversations with strangers who came and went without ever knowing my name. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Thomas studied. I worked. That became our rhythm. When the diner wasn't enough, I picked up a second job cleaning offices after hours. The buildings were quiet then. Empty. Just the sound of my footsteps and the hum of fluorescent lights. I would wipe down desks that belonged to people who had degrees, careers, futures that felt out of reach. And I would tell myself, one day Thomas will sit at a desk like this. One day it will be worth it. Years passed that way. Slowly, relentlessly. Thomas graduated with honors. I still remember the way he looked at me that day. Not proud of himself. Grateful. You did this, he said. I shook my head. No, I told him. You did. But deep down, I knew the truth was somewhere in between. After graduation, things changed. Not overnight, but steadily. Thomas found a good job, then a better one. We moved into a larger apartment, then a house. Ethan was born not long after. For a while, it felt like everything had aligned, like the years of struggle had finally led somewhere. But life doesn't follow a straight path. It never has. Thomas became sick when Ethan was just 12. At first, it was small things. Fatigue, headaches, nothing that seemed serious. Until it was. The diagnosis came quickly, too quickly, and everything we had built suddenly felt fragile. I went back to work. Not just one job. 2. Sometimes 3. I didn't think about it. I didn't question it. There was no time for that. There was only what needed to be done. Thomas passed away 2 years later. Ethan was 14. old enough to understand, too young to accept it. I remember standing in the hospital room after it happened. The silence, the stillness, the weight of everything that came next. I didn't cry right away. There were things to arrange, papers to sign, a son to hold together. Grief had to wait. After that, life became something else entirely. Not about dreams, not about plans, just survival. I worked during the day, took extra shifts at night. I learned how to stretch every dollar, how to make meals last longer, how to keep Ethan from feeling the absence too deeply. He needed stability. So I became it, even when I didn't feel it. It was during those years that something changed inside me, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. I saw how fragile opportunity was, how easily it could disappear, how many people never even got close to it. And I remembered something Thomas had once said. Education changes everything, he had told me. At the time, I had believed it because I believed in him. Now I believed it because I had lived it. The first time I sent money to Westbridge University, it wasn't much. Just a small amount, barely noticeable. I didn't even think of it as a donation, more like a gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of everything that place had given us, given him, given me in a way I hadn't fully understood back then. I didn't expect anything in return. I didn't want recognition. I didn't even include my full name, just initials. That was enough. But something about it stayed with me. That feeling, that sense that I was doing something that mattered beyond my own life, beyond my own struggles. So I did it again. A little more the next time. Then, a little more after that. Years passed. Ethan grew up, went to college himself, built a life. And through it all, I kept sending those contributions. Quietly. Consistently. Never enough to draw attention, but enough to matter. At least, that's what I hoped. I never told Ethan, not because I didn't trust him, but because it wasn't about him. It wasn't about being seen as generous, or important, or anything at all. It was about something simpler, giving someone else a chance, the way I had once wished someone would give me one. Back in my room, I sat at the desk, my hands resting lightly on the surface. The past felt closer tonight. Not distant, not faded, but present. Alive in a way it hadn't been for years. I looked at the drawer where the letter lay. Westbridge University. They had remembered, after all this time, after all those quiet years. They had seen. Downstairs, I heard the faint sound of Lauren moving through the kitchen. Cabinets opening, dishes being set away. Life continuing as it always did. Unaware. Unchanged. But not for long. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to escape, but to settle. To let everything find its place. Because the truth wasn't something I needed to force. It wasn't something I needed to argue for. It had always been there. Quiet, steady, waiting. And soon, it would speak for itself. For years, I never thought of what I was doing as anything significant. It didn't feel like generosity. It didn't feel like sacrifice. It simply felt necessary. The first time I received a letter back from Westbridge, I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was a receipt, a formality, something administrative that required no real attention. But when I did open it, I found something unexpected. A handwritten note, not long, just a few sentences. Thank you. Because of this, I can stay. No name, no details, just that. I remember sitting at my kitchen table back then, Ethan already grown, living his own life, and reading that line over and over again. Because of this, I can stay. Stay in school. Stay in a life that hadn't yet been taken away from them. I never found out. But I didn't need to. That single sentence told me everything I needed to know. And it changed something in me. After that, the contributions became more deliberate. Not larger all at once, but more intentional. I reached out carefully, anonymously, through the university's financial aid office. I asked questions, not about recognition, not about naming rights or plaques, just about need. Where does it matter most? I had written once. The response came weeks later. There are always students who fall through the cracks. That phrase stayed with me. Falling through the cracks. It sounded so simple, so passive, but I knew what it really meant. It meant being overlooked. It meant being one step away from losing everything, with no one there to catch you. I had lived close enough to that edge to understand it, so I focused there, quietly, consistently. I arranged for funds to be directed specifically toward those cases. Students who didn't qualify for enough aid. Students who were one payment away from dropping out. Students who had no one else. I never met them. I never asked for their stories. But sometimes they found their way to me anyway. Letters began to arrive over the years. Some typed, some handwritten. All different. All the same, in one way. Gratitude. I didn't think I would make it through the semester. My family couldn't help me. I was ready to give up, and then always something else. Because of you? I would read them at night, sitting alone in my living room, the house quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I never displayed them, never shared them. I kept them in a box, tucked away. Not hidden out of shame, but out of respect. Those stories weren't mine to show. They were gifts, and gifts I had learned don't need an audience to have value. As the years passed, my situation improved. Ethan had built his career. I had fewer financial worries. The house was paid off. Life had stabilized, and with that stability came something else: capacity, the ability to give more. So I did, not in grand gestures, not in ways that would draw attention, but steadily, quietly, like a thread woven into something larger, something I could feel, even if I couldn't see it. I remember one particular letter more clearly than the others. It came from a young man named James Porter. Unlike the others, he signed his full name. "I don't know if this will ever reach you," he wrote, "but I needed to try." I had paused at that line, needed to try. He went on to explain that he had nearly dropped out during his second year. His mother had fallen ill. Medical bills had taken everything. He had been working nights, barely sleeping, trying to keep up. "I was one semester away from losing everything I had worked for," he wrote. Then came the line that stayed with me. "I didn't know someone like you existed." I sat there for a long time after reading that. Not because it made me feel important, but because it made me realize something else. Sometimes, people don't need to know who you are. They just need to know someone cared enough to help. I wrote back to him. Not as Ryan Caldwell, just as someone. I told him to keep going, to finish what he had started, to remember that one moment of help didn't define his worth, but what he did with it might. He wrote again months later. He had graduated, top of his class. I kept that letter too. Back in the present, I sat in my room, the memory of those letters still vivid in my mind. The box was still with me, tucked at the back of my closet, unseen, unmentioned, just like everything else. Downstairs, I heard Lauren's voice again. She was on the phone, her tone light casual. I mean, we're managing, she said. It's just, you know how it is. Extra responsibility. I didn't need to hear the rest. The words were familiar now. Predictable. They no longer stung the way they once had. Because they came from a place that didn't know the full story. And I had stopped expecting it to. I stood and walked to the closet, pulling the box down carefully. It wasn't large. Just a simple container worn slightly at the edges. Inside were the letters. Dozens of them. Each one a reminder. Each one a quiet piece of something larger than myself. I opened one at random. Thank you for believing in someone you've never met. I smiled faintly, because belief, that was really what it had been. Not money, not support. Belief. And belief I had learned could change everything. I closed the box and placed it back where it belonged. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't need to prove anything with it, not yet. The letter from Westbridge still rested in the drawer. The invitation, the recognition, the moment that would bring everything into the open. I hadn't decided how I would handle it, whether I would tell Ethan, whether I would say anything to Lauren. But I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't explain myself to justify my existence. I had done too much for that, lived too much, given too much. I sat back down at the desk and folded my hands together. For years, I had been invisible by choice, quiet by design. Not because I lacked a voice, but because I didn't need to use it. Now that choice was changing. Not because I wanted it to, but because it was time. Time for the truth to exist without being hidden, without being reduced, without being misunderstood. Downstairs, I heard Ethan come home. His voice, Lauren's response, the familiar rhythm of their lives continuing. Unaware of what was coming, unaware of what had always been there. I closed my eyes for a moment and took a slow breath. Because soon, everything they thought they understood about me would be rewritten. Not with words, but with truth. It started with a drawer, not even an important one. Just the second drawer in the small desk in my room, the one I used for old papers, letters, things that didn't belong anywhere else. I hadn't realized I'd left it slightly open. I usually closed everything carefully. Habit, discipline, a quiet way of keeping order in a world that rarely offered it. But that morning, I must have been distracted. Because when I returned from my walk, Lauren was standing in my room. My door was open, wider than I ever left it. She turned when she heard my footsteps. "Oh," she said, straightening slightly. "I didn't hear you come in." I stopped just inside the doorway. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. Her hand was resting lightly on the edge of the desk. The drawer was open. Not fully, but enough. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't accusing, but it was clear. Lauren didn't look embarrassed. That surprised me. "I was looking for the extra batteries," she said. "Ethan said you might have some." I nodded slowly. "They're in the kitchen," I said. A small pause, then she smiled just slightly. "Good to know." But she didn't move right away. Her eyes flicked briefly to the drawer, then back to me. "I didn't mean to invade your space," she added. But something in her tone didn't match the words. Something curious. Something already forming a conclusion. Later that afternoon, I noticed it. A shift. Not loud, not immediate, but present. Lauren moved differently around me. Her glances lingered a fraction longer. Her tone more pointed. As if she had seen something she didn't fully understand, but had already decided what it meant. It became clear that evening. I was in the kitchen making tea when she walked in holding a stack of papers. My papers. I recognized them instantly. Bank statements, Old transfer records, documents I hadn't thought twice about leaving in that drawer. You want to explain this? She asked. Her voice was calm, controlled, but beneath it, something sharper. I turned slowly. What is that? I asked, though I already knew. She held up one of the pages. Transfers, she said. Large ones. I stepped closer, taking a look. Dates, amounts, years of quiet consistency laid out in black and white. You've been moving money regularly? She continued. And not small amounts. I met her eyes, and I asked. Her expression hardened slightly. And we've been having conversations about expenses, she said. About fairness. About contribution. There it was. The connection she had made. The conclusion she had drawn. You said nothing about having this kind of money, she added. I felt a quiet stillness settle inside me. I never said I didn't, I replied. That seemed to catch her off guard, for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. That's not the point, she said. The point is, you've been keeping this from us. Keeping, as if it belonged to them, as if I owed an explanation. I didn't respond immediately, because I could see where this was going. And I knew anything I said now would only confirm what she already believed. So what is this? She pressed, holding up another sheet. Are you hiding money? Saving it somewhere else while we're covering your living expenses? The words came faster now. More certain, more accusatory. I'm not hiding anything, I said calmly. Then explain it, she said. I looked at the papers again, then back at her. No, I said. The word hung in the air, unexpected, firm. Lauren blinked. I'm sorry, she said. I said no, I repeated. Her expression shifted. Not confusion, not even anger. Something closer to disbelief. You don't think you owe us an explanation? She asked. I tilted my head slightly. For my personal finances, I said. No, I don't. The silence that followed was different from the ones before. This wasn't tension. This was friction. Lauren let out a short breath, almost a laugh. Wow, she said. Okay. She placed the papers down on the counter, neatly, deliberately. You're living in our home, she said, eating our food, using our utilities. And you don't think transparency matters? There it was again, transparency. A word she used as if it were unquestionable, as if it justified everything. I've never refused to contribute, I said. But you haven't, she shot back. Not really. Her voice was sharper now, more open. You do small things around the house, sure, but financially, you've said nothing. Meanwhile, you're clearly moving money somewhere else. I watched her carefully, not reacting, not defending, just observing. Because this wasn't about truth anymore. It was about perception. And hers was already set. Ethan walked in just then. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. Lauren turned to him immediately. Your mother has been hiding money, she said. The words were direct, heavy, final. Ethan frowned. What? She gestured toward the papers. Look at this, she said. Regular transfers. Large amounts. For years. He picked up one of the sheets, scanning it quickly, then looking at me. Mom, he said. There it was. The moment. The question. The opportunity to explain everything. To tell them the truth. To lay it all out and end the misunderstanding. But I didn't. Because I knew something they didn't. Timing matters. And this wasn't the right moment. Not yet. It's my money, I said simply. That's not an answer, Lauren snapped. It's the only one you need right now, I replied. Ethan looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Mom, if there's something going on, we should just talk about it, he said. We are talking about it, Lauren said sharply. And she's refusing to be honest. I met Ethan's gaze. I'm not being dishonest, I said. Then what are you being? Lauren demanded. I held her eyes. Private. The words seemed to frustrate her more than anything else I had said. This isn't about privacy, she said. This is about fairness. No, I said quietly. It's about control. The room went still. Lauren's expression hardened. Excuse me. You've been trying to define my place here, I continued. What I use, what I cost, what I contribute. That's because I understand why, I interrupted gently. But that doesn't mean I have to accept it. Ethan stepped in then. Okay, let's just calm down, he said. This doesn't have to turn into something bigger. But it already had. We all knew it. Lauren crossed her arms. If you're going to live here, she said, then this needs to be transparent. I shook my head slightly. No, I said, it doesn't. Her eyes narrowed. Then maybe we need to rethink this arrangement, she said. There it was. The line. Clear, unmistakable. I nodded slowly. Maybe we do, I said. That night, I returned to my room and closed the door behind me. The house felt different now. Not just tense, divided. I walked to the desk and opened the drawer. The letter was still there, untouched, unseen. I picked it up and held it for a moment. Then I smiled. Not because of what had just happened, but because I could see what was coming next. Lauren thought she had uncovered something, a secret, a flaw, a reason to question me. But what she had really found was the beginning of the truth. And soon, she wouldn't be able to look away from it. The house didn't feel like the same place the next morning. It wasn't louder. It wasn't more chaotic. If anything, it was quieter. But it was the kind of quiet that comes after something has already broken. Lauren moved through the kitchen with sharp efficiency, every motion deliberate. Cabinets opened and closed with just a little more force than necessary. Dishes touched the counter with a harder edge. Ethan sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, but I could tell he wasn't really reading anything. He looked up when I entered. "Morning, Mom," he said. His voice was careful, too careful. "Good morning," I replied. I walked to the coffee maker and began preparing my usual cup, moving slowly, giving them space to say what they needed to say. It didn't take long. "We should talk about last night," Lauren said, without looking at me. There it was, direct, unavoidable. I poured the coffee into my cup before turning around. "I thought we already did," I said, calmly. Lauren finally looked up. "No," she said, "we didn't." Ethan sighed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Let's just keep this calm," he added. Lauren ignored him. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on me. "You're moving large amounts of money?" she said. "Regularly, and you refuse to explain it." "I told you," I replied, "it's personal." "That's not good enough," she said immediately. There was no hesitation now, no softness, only conviction. Ethan set his phone down. "Mom, if there's something we need to understand." "There isn't," I said. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's nothing you need to understand," I replied. "Not about this." Lauren let out a sharp breath. "That's exactly the problem," she said. "You think you can just live here, use everything we provide, And keep your finances completely separate. Her voice rose slightly. Not yelling, but close. I'm not using anything you provide without awareness, I said. Awareness? She repeated, almost incredulous. Ryan, we're covering everything. The mortgage, utilities, groceries I've offered to contribute, I said. You've offered small things, she snapped. That's not the same. There it was again. Measurement. Value assigned in terms she understood. I took a sip of my coffee before responding. Then tell me, I said, what would be enough. The question caught her off guard. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. This isn't about a number, she said quickly. It's about honesty. No, I replied quietly. It's about control. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Okay, he said, raising a hand slightly. Let's not turn this into... It already is, Lauren said, cutting him off. She stood up then, walking toward the counter where the papers still sat. These transfers, she said, picking them up again, they've been happening for years. She turned back to me. Before you even moved in here. I nodded. Yes. So you've had access to this money the whole time, she continued. Yes. And you never thought to contribute more. She pressed. I held her gaze. I never thought I needed to justify myself, I said. That did it. Her expression hardened completely. Wow, she said, shaking her head slightly. That's unbelievable. Ethan stood up slowly. Mom, he said, his voice quieter, now more serious. This isn't just about Lauren. I looked at him. I know. It's about us, he added. We're trying to build something here. A stable household. And when things don't add up... They do add up, I said. He frowned. No, they don't, he said. Not from where we're standing. I paused. Because that was the truth. From where they were standing, nothing made sense. And I had chosen that. I had chosen silence. I had chosen privacy. And now that choice was being interpreted as something else. Something negative. Something selfish. Lauren crossed her arms again. If you're not going to explain it, she said, then we have to assume the worst. I raised an eyebrow slightly. And what is the worst? I asked. That you're hiding assets? She said. That you're choosing not to contribute while expecting us to support you. The words were sharp, deliberate, designed to land. I set my cup down carefully. I've never expected anything, I said. You're living here, she replied immediately. Yes, I said. Because Ethan asked me to. Ethan shifted again. That's not, but I didn't come here to take, I continued. And I certainly didn't come here to be evaluated. Lauren let out a short, frustrated laugh. This isn't evaluation, she said. It's reality. The word echoed in the room. Reality. I looked around the kitchen. The clean counters. The organized space. The life Lauren had built so carefully. And I understood something. This wasn't just about money. This was about order, about control, about ensuring that everything and everyone fit into the structure she had created. And I didn't, not the way she needed me to. So what do you want? I asked. Lauren didn't hesitate. I want transparency, she said. Full transparency. I nodded slowly. And if you don't get it? I asked. She held my gaze. Don't get it, I asked. She held my gaze. Then we need to reconsider this arrangement. There it was again. Clearer this time. Stronger. Ethan looked between us. Lauren? No, she said firmly. This isn't unreasonable. Then we need to reconsider this arrangement. There it was again. Clearer this time. Stronger. Ethan looked between us. Lauren, no, she said firmly. This isn't unreasonable. She turned back to me. We've been patient, she said. We've tried to make this work, but we can't keep going like this. I studied her face. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with understanding. Because in her mind, she wasn't being cruel. She was being practical, logical, fair. I understand, I said. The words seemed to surprise both of them. Lauren blinked. You do? Yes, I said. I understand exactly what you're asking. And, she pressed. I picked up my cup again, holding it lightly in my hands. And my answer is still no. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Ethan exhaled slowly. Mom. He said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Why? It was the first time he had asked that question. Not as an accusation, but as a son. Why I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a brief moment, I considered telling him everything. The letters, the years, the truth. But then I remembered something. Timing. And this still wasn't it. Because some things I said gently don't need to be explained to be real. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. It will, I said. When? Lauren snapped. I met her eyes. Soon, that word lingered in the air. Soon. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a promise. Just a statement. Lauren shook her head. I don't have patience for soon, she said. I know, I replied. I turned then, picking up my cup and walking toward the stairs. Where are you going? Ethan asked. To my room, I said. We're not finished, Lauren said sharply. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, then looked back at her. Yes, I said quietly. We are. Upstairs, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. The house felt heavier now. More divided, more defined. Lines had been drawn, clear, unmistakable. I walked to the desk and opened the drawer once more. The letter was still there, unchanged, unmoved, waiting. I picked it up and held it in my hands. Then I smiled. Because downstairs, they were still trying to figure out what I was hiding. But soon, they would realize I hadn't been hiding anything at all. The morning of the ceremony arrived quietly. No announcement, no discussion, just another day in a house that had already decided what I was worth. I woke earlier than usual. Not out of nerves, but out of habit. And perhaps something else. Something steadier. Something that felt like the beginning of a conclusion. The house was still asleep when I stepped into the hallway. The air was cool, the silence undisturbed. For a moment, I stood there listening, not for anything specific, just taking in the stillness. Then, I went back into my room and closed the door. On the bed lay the dress I had taken out the night before. It wasn't new, it wasn't expensive, but it was dignified. A deep navy color, simple in design, something I had worn years ago to an event I barely remembered now. Back then, it had felt like something special. Today, it felt like something fitting. I ran my hand over the fabric, smoothing it gently. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I doubted where I was going, but because I knew what it meant. Once I walked out that door, things wouldn't remain hidden anymore, not in the way they had been. And there was a strange kind of peace in that. I dressed slowly, carefully, each movement deliberate. There was no rush, no urgency, just a quiet sense of purpose. I brushed my hair, adjusting it the way I always had. Not to impress, not to present anything different, just to be myself. When I finally looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman Lauren saw. I didn't see the burden. I saw someone who had lived, who had endured, who had given more than she had ever asked to receive. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't look away. Downstairs, I could hear movement. Lauren, the faint clatter of dishes, Ethan's voice low, still half asleep. I took a breath and stepped out of my room. The stairs creaked softly under my weight as I descended. Lauren was at the counter pouring coffee. Ethan sat at the table, his phone in hand. They both looked up when they saw me, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Lauren's eyes moved slowly over my appearance. The dress, the shoes, the small details she hadn't seen before. "Going somewhere?" she asked. Her tone wasn't curious. It was evaluative. I picked up my purse from the chair. "Yes," I said. "Where?" Ethan asked. I met his eyes. "I have an appointment." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "An appointment?" she repeated. "Yes." With who?" she pressed. I paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Someone who's been expecting me for a long time," I said. That answer didn't satisfy her. I could see it immediately. Her expression tightened slightly. "That's vague," she said. "It's enough," I replied. Ethan stood up. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. There was a part of him that still wanted to help, still wanted to be a son, even if he didn't fully understand what was happening. "No," I said gently. "I'll manage." He nodded, though I could tell he was unsure. Lauren crossed her arms. "You're dressed pretty formally for an appointment," she said. I looked at her. "I believe in showing respect," I replied, for who she asked. "For the moment," I said. There was a silence after that. A brief one, but heavy. Because they both felt it. Something was happening. Something they didn't understand. And for once, I wasn't explaining it. "I'll be back later," I said, moving toward the door. "Ryan!" Lauren called. I stopped, not turning around immediately. "Yes, if this has anything to do with those transfers," she began. I turned then, meeting her gaze. "It has everything to do with my life," I said, "and nothing to do with your assumptions." Her lips pressed together. Ethan looked between us again. He started. But I didn't wait. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air felt different, lighter, cooler, as if the world beyond that house had been waiting for me to step back into it. I walked slowly to the curb where the car I had arranged was already waiting. Not a luxury, not anything extravagant, just appropriate. The driver stepped out and opened the door. "Miss Caldwell?" he asked politely. "Yes," I replied. He nodded. "Right this way." I paused for a moment before getting in. Just a moment, looking back at the house, at the windows, at the life inside that had tried to define me in ways that no longer fit. Then I stepped into the car. As we drove away, I allowed myself to relax into the seat. The city moved around us. Familiar streets, places I had passed countless times without ever stopping. And yet today, everything felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because I had stopped shrinking myself within it. Westbridge University wasn't far, but the distance felt significant. Each mile, a quiet transition. From one version of myself to another that had always existed just unseen. When the car finally pulled up to the entrance, I could see it. The building, large, elegant, the kind of place that carried history in its walls. Students moved in and out, their conversations blending into a low, steady hum. Faculty members stood in small groups, dressed formally, their presence calm but purposeful. And there, just beyond the main doors, a banner. Subtle, refined, but unmistakable. Annual Benefactor Recognition Ceremony. I felt something shift inside me again. Not nerves, not fear, just confirmation. The driver opened the door. "We've arrived," he said. I stepped out slowly, taking in the scene before me. For a brief moment, I stood still. Not because I didn't belong, but because I had spent so many years believing I didn't need to. And now, I was here anyway. A woman approached me from the entrance. Professional, warm, confident. "Miss Caldwell?" she asked. "Yes." Her smile widened. "We've been expecting you." The words landed differently this time. Not like a surprise, not like a question, but like something that had always been true. As I followed her inside, I felt the weight of the past settle into something lighter, something clearer. Behind me, the house, the doubts, the assumptions. Ahead of me, the truth. And for the first time, there would be no need to hide it. Back at the house, things didn't settle after I left. They shifted, sharply. Lauren stood by the window longer than she meant to. She told herself she was just finishing her coffee, just thinking. But her eyes kept returning to the street, to the spot where the car had been. "That wasn't normal," she said finally. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "What wasn't?" he asked, though he already knew. "She doesn't dress like that for nothing," Lauren replied. "And that carded, you see that she arranged that." Ethan frowned slightly. So, Lauren repeated, turning to him. "Ethan, your mother is hiding something, and it's not small." He exhaled slowly. "She said it was personal." Lauren gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Of course she did," she said. "That's what people say when they don't want to be questioned." Ethan didn't respond immediately, because part of him wasn't as certain as she was. "I just don't understand why she won't tell us," he said. Lauren crossed her arms again. "Because she doesn't want us to know," she said. "Which means, whatever it is, it doesn't look good." That assumption came easily to her. Too easily. And once it settled, it became truth in her mind. Ethan stood up, pacing slightly. "Maybe we're pushing too hard," he said. Lauren turned sharply. "No," she said. "We're not pushing enough." He stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're letting her control the situation," she said. "She's living here using our resources, and we're just accepting whatever she tells us or doesn't tell us." Ethan hesitated. "That's my mother," he said. "And this is our home," Lauren replied. The words landed harder than she intended, but she didn't take them back. There was a long pause. Then Lauren made a decision. "We need to know where she went," she said. Ethan looked at her. "What? I'm serious," she said. "If she's not going to tell us, then we find out ourselves." "That's not Lauren. That is not right. Isn't it?" she challenged. "After everything we've just seen?" Ethan rubbed his face. "This feels like crossing a line." "She crossed it first," Lauren said quickly. "The moment she decided we didn't deserve honesty," Ethan didn't answer. Because deep down, he wasn't sure where the line was anymore. Lauren grabbed her phone. "I'm going to check something," she said. "What?" Ethan asked. "The bank," she replied. "The statements I saw, some of those transfers had references." Ethan frowned. "You memorized them?" "I noticed details," she said. That much was true. Lauren didn't miss things. And once something caught her attention, she followed it. Minutes passed. Ethan sat back down, watching her as she scrolled through her phone, her expression growing more focused, more intense. Finally, she stopped. There she said, what he asked. She turned the screen toward him. A name, she said. Westbridge. Ethan blinked. Westbridge University, he said. Yes. They both went quiet for a moment. Because that name, it meant something. Why would she be sending money to a university? Ethan asked. Lauren shook her head. I don't know, she said. But it's been happening for years. Donations he suggested for years. Donations he suggested. She looked at him. Donations, she repeated. Ethan, those amounts weren't small. He leaned back. But that doesn't mean, it means she has more money than she's telling us. She looked at him. Donations, she repeated. Ethan, those amounts weren't small. He leaned back. But that doesn't mean it means she has more money than she's telling us. Lauren cut in. And she's choosing to give it away instead of contributing here. That was the conclusion she needed. Simple. Direct. Damning! Ethan stood again. She wouldn't do that, he said. Lauren raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't she? She asked. He hesitated, because now doubt had entered the space. And doubt is difficult to remove once it settles. We need to see where she is, Lauren said again. Ethan looked at her. You're serious? Yes. He shook his head slightly. This feels wrong. This feels necessary, she replied. Another pause, longer this time. Then Ethan sighed. Fine, he said quietly. But we're not confronting her there. Lauren nodded, agreed. That wasn't her goal. Not yet. She wanted to see, to understand, to confirm what she already believed. They left the house not long after. Lauren drove. Ethan sat beside her silent, watching the road ahead. Westbridge University, she said, typing the address into the GPS. The route appeared, clear, direct. Not far. The drive was quiet, not comfortable, but focused. Each of them lost in their own thoughts. Lauren imagined scenarios, explanations. None of them favorable. Ethan remembered things, small moments, times when his mother had said nothing instead of explaining, times when he hadn't asked questions, because it had been easier not to. When they arrived, the campus was already alive with activity. Cars lined the entrance. People dressed formally moved toward the main building. Lauren slowed the car. This is an event, she said. Ethan looked around. Yeah, he replied quietly. They parked a short distance away. Not too close, not too obvious. Lauren stepped out first, scanning the area. Let's just see, she said. Ethan followed. His chest felt tighter than he expected. Not from anger, not from suspicion, but from something else. Something he couldn't quite name. They walked toward the entrance, slowly, carefully, trying not to stand out. As they approached the building, they saw it. The banner. Clear. Unmistakable. Annual Benefactor Recognition Ceremony. Lauren stopped, her eyes fixed on the words. Benefactor, she said under her breath. Ethan stared at it too. Something shifted inside him. Not fully. Not yet, but enough. Why would she be here? Lauren asked. Her voice had changed, less certain, more questioning. Ethan didn't answer, because for the first time he wasn't sure. They moved closer, blending into the small crowd gathering near the entrance. Guests had checked in. Staff greeted attendees with warm, practiced smiles. Everything felt important, structured, significant. Lauren's eyes scanned the area, looking for me, for any sign, any confirmation. Then she saw it, at the top of the steps, just inside the doorway, standing beside a woman in formal attire. calm, composed, recognized. Me. Lauren froze. Her breath caught slightly. That's her, she said. Ethan followed her gaze, and when he saw me, something inside him broke open. Not fully, but enough to feel it. I wasn't standing alone. People were speaking to me, greeting me, shaking my hand, smiling. Not the polite, distant smiles Lauren gave, but something else, something genuine, respectful. That doesn't make sense, Lauren said softly. But her voice lacked conviction now, because what she was seeing didn't fit the story she had built. Ethan stepped forward, or she had built. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Let's go inside, he said. Lauren hesitated, just for a moment, then nodded. They walked toward the entrance, past the banner, past the staff, into a room where the truth was about to become impossible to ignore. The auditorium was larger than I remembered, not physically, but in presence, in weight, in meaning. Rows of seats filled slowly as guests took their places, faculty members, donors, students, families. Conversations floated softly through the space, polite and measured, carrying a sense of importance without needing to announce it. Lauren and Ethan slipped into the back row. Not together, not quite apart. Close enough to share the moment, far enough to process it separately. Are you sure that's her? Lauren whispered. Ethan didn't answer immediately, because there was no doubt anymore. I was seated near the front. Not in the audience, but just to the side of the stage, among people who were being greeted differently, acknowledged differently, treated with respect. That's her, he said quietly. Lauren's eyes didn't leave me. But why? She asked. The question was no longer sharp, no longer accusatory. Now it was uncertain. The lights dimmed slightly, a subtle signal. Conversations quieted. People shifted in their seats, turning their attention toward the stage. A woman stepped up to the podium, confident, composed, professional. Good afternoon, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. And welcome to Westbridge University's annual Benefactor Recognition Ceremony. The words settled over the audience. Formal, expected, but for Lauren, for Ethan. They landed differently, because suddenly this wasn't just an event, it was context. We gather here today, the woman continued, to honor individuals whose generosity has shaped the lives of countless students, often in ways that go unseen. Lauren's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. Unseen. The word echoed. These benefactors, the speaker went on, have not only supported this institution financially, but have embodied something far greater: belief in potential. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Listening now. Really listening. Some of them, she added with a soft smile, have chosen to remain anonymous for years. Lauren's breath caught, just slightly. Anonymous. And yet, the speaker continued, their impact has been profound. There was a pause, a deliberate one. To begin, she said, we would like to recognize a very special individual. Lauren's eyes flicked back to me, then to the stage, then back again. Because something was aligning, slowly, uncomfortably. This person, the speaker said, has been a quiet pillar of support for over 3 decades. Ethan's chest tightened. 3 decades. That wasn't recent. That wasn't accidental. That was intentional. Through consistent, dedicated contributions, the speaker continued, She has helped hundreds of students continue their education when they otherwise could not. Lauren shook her head slightly. No, she whispered, but there was no certainty in it anymore. Only resistance. She has never asked for recognition, the woman said. Never sought acknowledgement. In fact, for many years, we didn't even know the full extent of her generosity. She has never asked for recognition, the woman said. Never sought acknowledgement. In fact, for many years, we didn't even know the full extent of her generosity. Ethan's eyes widened slightly because suddenly the pieces were no longer scattered. They were forming something. It is only recently the speaker added that we were able to fully understand just how much she has given. Lauren's gaze dropped for a moment to her hands, to the memory of the bank statements, the transfers, the amounts. And today, the woman said, her voice softening, "We are honored to finally recognize her." There was a pause, the kind that holds a room still. Ryan Caldwell. The name echoed through the auditorium. Clear, unmistakable, final. Lauren froze. Completely. Her body went still, her mind struggling to catch up to what she had just heard. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't look away. Because on the stage, I was standing. Applause began, soft at first, then building, not forced, not polite, but genuine, respectful, earned. I walked slowly toward the podium, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady, each step measured, each movement calm. Because this moment didn't belong to anyone else's perception, only to truth. From the back row, Lauren stared, her expression shifting rapidly, confusion, disbelief, recognition, and something else, something heavier. "That's not possible," she whispered. But it was, right in front of her. Ethan swallowed hard, because now he understood. Not everything, not yet, but enough. I reached the podium and turned to face the audience. The applause slowly faded. The room settled, and for a moment, right in front of her, Ethan swallowed hard. Because now he understood. Not everything, not yet, but enough. I reached the podium and turned to face the audience. The applause slowly faded, the room settled, and for a moment there was silence. "I didn't expect this," I said. My voice was calm, not loud, but it carried. "I never needed this." I paused, looking out at the faces in the room. Some familiar, most not, but all present. I did what I believed was right. I continued. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I understood what it meant to almost lose everything. The words hung in the air. Simple, direct, true. Education gave my family a future, I said. And when I had the ability to give that chance to someone else, I did. No embellishment, no exaggeration, just fact. I never thought of it as generosity, I added. Just responsibility. A quiet murmur moved through the audience. Not disagreement, understanding. "I also never thought it would lead to this," I said, glancing briefly at the stage, the room, the moment. "But if there's one thing I've learned," I paused, then continued. It's that the things we do quietly still matter." Another pause, longer this time, because I wasn't just speaking to them. I was speaking to the past, to the years of silence, to the life that had been misunderstood. "And sometimes," I said softly, "the truth doesn't need to be announced to be real." In the back row, Lauren's eyes filled. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Because everything she had believed, everything she had assumed, was unraveling. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together, his mind replaying every moment, every word, every silence. And for the first time, he saw me. Not as someone in his home, not as a responsibility, but as someone he had never fully understood. On stage, I stepped back slightly as the applause returned. Stronger this time, fuller. Not just appreciation, but recognition. And in that moment, there was no hiding left. No misunderstanding strong enough to remain. Only truth. Clear, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. The applause lingered long after I stepped away from the podium. It wasn't loud anymore. It had softened into something deeper. Respect, recognition, understanding. But in the back row, none of that mattered the way it should have. Because for Lauren and Ethan, the room had gone silent in a different way. The kind of silence that comes when everything you thought was true suddenly isn't. Lauren didn't clap. Her hands remained still in her lap, fingers slightly curled as if she didn't know what to do with them anymore. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking, searching, trying to reconcile what she had just seen with everything she had believed. This was the same woman she had called a burden. The same woman she had questioned, controlled, measured. And now she was being honored in a room full of people who clearly saw her differently. Ethan finally brought his hands together, but the movement felt delayed, uncertain. He wasn't applauding the way the others were. He was catching up, his mind moving through years in seconds, every memory shifting, every moment re-examined. He remembered the quiet, the patience, the way I never argued, the way I stepped back instead of pushing forward. He had always interpreted it as passivity. Now he wasn't so sure. Lauren leaned slightly toward him. "Did you know?" she whispered. Her voice was tight, controlled. But there was something beneath it now. Something fragile. Ethan shook his head slowly. No. The word felt heavier than it should have. Because it didn't just mean he didn't know. It meant he had never asked. Lauren swallowed. But how she said, he didn't answer. Because the question wasn't simple anymore. It wasn't just about money or donations. It was about everything they had missed, everything they had chosen not to see. On stage, the ceremony continued. Names were called. Stories were shared. But Lauren and Ethan weren't really listening. They were watching me, watching the way people approached me, the way they spoke to me, the way they listened when I responded. There was no hesitation in those interactions, no evaluation, no subtle distance, only respect. A man approached me near the side of the stage, mid-30s, well-dressed, confident, but when he spoke, there was something else in his posture. Gratitude. Lauren noticed it immediately. "Who is that?" she whispered. Ethan didn't know, but he kept watching. The man spoke to me for a moment, then stepped back slightly. He looked emotional, not overwhelmed, but deeply affected. And then he did something neither Lauren nor Ethan expected. He reached out and shook my hand with both of his, holding it longer than usual, as if the moment meant something more than a simple greeting. Lauren's breath caught again. "That's not normal," she said. No, it wasn't, because this wasn't a normal situation. The man stepped up to the podium shortly after. "James Porter," the announcer said. Lauren stiffened slightly. The name sounded familiar, not from memory, but from something else, something recent. She glanced at Ethan. "Porter," she whispered. He looked at her. "What?" "The letters," she said quietly. His eyes widened, because now he remembered too. The name. One of the letters I had kept. One of the people whose lives had been changed. And now he was here, standing on stage, real, present, speaking. James adjusted the microphone slightly before beginning. "I wasn't sure what I was going to say today," he admitted, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. The room quieted. "I've spoken in front of people before," he continued, "but this feels different. I wasn't sure what I was going to say today." He admitted, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. The room quieted. "I've spoken in front of people before," he continued, "but this feels different." He glanced toward me and smiled. Not politely, not professionally, but personally. "As many of you know, I was one of the students who benefited from the scholarship fund that changed my life." Lauren felt her chest tighten, because the words were no longer abstract. They were connecting. Directly. "I didn't come from a place where college was guaranteed," James said. "I came from a place where every step forward felt temporary." They were connecting. Directly. "I didn't come from a place where college was guaranteed," James said. "I came from a place where every step forward felt temporary." Ethan leaned forward slightly, listening now. Fully. "There was a point," James continued, "where I thought I was going to lose everything I had worked for." He paused, taking a breath. "My mother was sick. The bills were overwhelming, and I was one semester away from dropping out." The room was silent, not out of politeness, but out of understanding. Lauren's hands tightened together, because she had never thought about it that way, never imagined the weight behind those transfers. "I remember getting the notice," James said. "The one that said my tuition had been covered." His voice softened. "I didn't know who had done it." He looked at me again, but I knew someone had chosen to believe in me. Lauren blinked, her vision slightly blurred. Not from tears, not yet, but from something else. Something shifting. "I didn't meet her until today," James said, "but I've been carrying her impact with me for years." Ethan's breath caught, because that sentence, it said everything, without needing explanation. James smiled again. "Miss Caldwell," he said, turning fully toward me, "you didn't just help me stay in school." He paused. "You helped me become someone I never thought I could be." The applause returned, stronger, more personal, more real. Lauren couldn't ignore it anymore. She felt it, not as noise, but as truth. A truth she had been standing against, without even realizing it. Ethan sat back slowly, his eyes still on me, but his expression had changed completely. There was no confusion left, no doubt, only realization, and something heavier, regret, because now he saw it, all of it, the years, the silence, the dignity, and his own failure to recognize it. Lauren finally lowered her gaze, for the first time since they had arrived, because looking at me now was harder than not looking at all. Not because I had changed, but because she had. And the difference between who she thought I was and who I actually was too large to ignore. On stage, the ceremony moved forward, but for them, everything had already happened. The truth had been revealed, not in a confrontation, Not in an argument, but in something far more powerful. Recognition. And there was no way to take it back. No way to reinterpret it. No way to control it. Only one thing left to do. Accept it. When the ceremony ended, the room slowly began to loosen. People stood, conversations resumed, chairs shifted back into movement. But for Lauren and Ethan, nothing moved the way it should have. They remained seated for a moment longer than everyone else, not because they wanted to stay, but because they didn't know how to stand. Everything inside them had changed too quickly, too completely. Lauren finally rose first, her movement slower than usual, less certain. Ethan followed, but his eyes were still fixed on the front of the room. On me. I was speaking with a small group of people, smiling gently, listening more than talking. Exactly the same way I always had at home. But here, it meant something different. Here it was seen as presence, as dignity, as quiet strength, not silence, not weakness. Lauren swallowed. Her throat felt tight. "That's really her," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. I know. There was no denial left, no resistance, only truth. And truth, once it arrives, does not leave space for anything else. They stood there unsure of what to do next. Leave, approach me. Pretend they hadn't seen anything. None of those options felt right, because none of them erased what had just happened. Lauren glanced toward the exit. "We should go," she said, but she didn't move. Ethan didn't either, because something was pulling them forward. Not curiosity anymore, not suspicion. Something else, something heavier, responsibility. He took a step, then another. Lauren hesitated, then followed. They moved slowly through the crowd, careful, almost hesitant, as if approaching something fragile, something they might break just by getting too close. As they neared, I noticed them. Of course I did. I had known they were there before they even stepped inside. Not because I had seen them immediately, but because something in the air had shifted. Because some truths I had known they were there before they even stepped inside. Not because I had seen them immediately, but because something in the air had shifted. Because some truths carry weight long before they are spoken. I finished my conversation and turned toward them fully. We stood facing each other. No audience now. No stage. Just three people. And everything that had been left unsaid between us. For a moment, no one spoke. Lauren's eyes moved over my face, searching, not for confirmation anymore, but for something else. Understanding. She began, then stopped. Her voice failed her. That had never happened before. Lauren had always known what to say, always had the right words, the right tone, the right control. But now, there was no structure to hold on to, no script to follow, only truth, and truth does not come with instructions. Ethan stepped forward slightly. "Mom," he said, just that one word. But it sounded different now. Not casual, not distracted, present. I looked at him. "Yes." He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "I didn't know," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not an excuse, not a defense, just a fact. "I know," I replied. Lauren looked between us, her hands trembling slightly now, though she tried to hide it. "You should have told us," she said, but even as she said it, she didn't sound certain. I tilted my head slightly. "Would it have made a difference?" I asked. The question landed softly, but it cut deeper than anything else. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she didn't know. Because if she was honest, she wasn't sure she would have listened. Not really. Ethan looked down briefly, then back at me. We were wrong, he said. No hesitation this time. No distance. Just truth. Lauren inhaled sharply, as if the words had been pulled out of her before she was ready. But she didn't argue, because she felt it too. I was wrong, she said quietly. The admission was small, but it cost her more than anything she had said before. Her voice trembled slightly. I thought she began, then stopped again, because what she thought no longer mattered. Not in the way it once had. I thought you were hiding something, she said finally. I nodded. I was. They both looked at me, surprised, confused, but not in the way you believed. I continued. Lauren's eyes filled. Not fully, but enough to change the way she held herself. I called you a burden, she said. The words came out slowly, carefully, as if saying them now made them heavier than they had been before. I didn't respond immediately, because I remembered that moment. The dinner, the silence, the weight of it. But I also remembered something else. How I had chosen not to react. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew something they didn't. You did, I said. Lauren swallowed. I was wrong, she repeated. This time her voice broke slightly. Not dramatically, but enough. Ethan stepped closer. I should have said something, he added. I should have defended you. I looked at him. You should have understood me, I said gently. The words weren't harsh, but they were true, and truth when spoken calmly can be more powerful than anger. He nodded. I know, he said, and this time he meant it. Lauren wiped at her eyes quickly, trying to regain control. I didn't see you, she said. I only saw what I thought you were. I held her gaze. That's the difference, I said, between looking and understanding. She nodded slowly, taking it in, letting it settle. The space between us felt different now. Not tense, not divided, but open, uncomfortable, honest, which is often the first step towards something better. Ethan took a breath. Can we fix this? He asked. The question was quiet, almost fragile. I looked at him, then at Lauren, and for a moment I said nothing, because forgiveness is not immediate, not automatic. It requires something, not just apology, but understanding, change, time. I don't think it's something you fix, I said. They both waited. It's something you learn from, I added. Lauren nodded, tears now visible in her eyes. I want to, she said. I really do. I believed her, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, because the certainty she once carried had been replaced by something else. Humility. And that changes people. Ethan stepped closer again. Come home with us, he said. The words were instinctive, immediate, as if that was the natural next step. But I shook my head slightly. Not today, I said. They both looked surprised. Why, Lauren asked softly. I met her gaze. Because I need you to understand something first, I said. They waited. I'm not someone you take in, I continued. I'm someone who chooses where I belong. The words were calm, but firm, and they needed to hear them. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand, he said. Lauren didn't speak, but her expression said enough. She was beginning to, and sometimes, beginning is enough. I left the university later that afternoon alone, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The air outside felt softer than it had that morning, warmer somehow. Or maybe it was just me. The world had not changed. The streets were the same. The buildings were the same. People moved through their lives without knowing anything about what had just happened inside that auditorium. And yet, for me, everything felt different. Not because I had been recognized, not because of the applause or the words spoken on stage, but because something that had been hidden for so long had finally been seen. Not by the world, but by the people who mattered. And that changed something inside me in a way I had not expected. I walked slowly toward the street and paused before stepping off the curb. Not out of hesitation, but out of awareness. For years, I had lived quietly, not invisible, but intentionally unseen. Now that was no longer true, and I had to decide what that meant for the rest of my life. When I returned to the house, the sun was already beginning to lower. The lights stretched across the driveway in long shadows. Everything looked exactly the same, but I knew it wasn't. I opened the door and stepped inside. Lauren was in the living room. She stood up the moment she saw me. Not slowly, not casually, immediately. Ethan was there too. He rose as well. They had been waiting. I could see it in the way they held themselves, in the silence that filled the room before anyone spoke. "I didn't know if you would come back tonight," Ethan said. His voice was careful, but not distant. "I said I would," I replied. Lauren stepped forward slightly. Her hands were clasped together. Not in control, not composed, just held. "I've been thinking all afternoon," she said. I nodded. "I assumed you would." She let out a small breath. "I was wrong about everything," she said. This time the words came more easily, not because they were lighter, but because she had accepted them. "I thought I understood what you were doing," she continued. "I thought I had the right to question you the way I did." She paused, then looked directly at me. "I didn't." I listened, not interrupting, not correcting, just letting her speak. Because sometimes people need to hear themselves say the truth before they can fully understand it. Ethan stepped in slightly. "We both were," he said. "I should have asked you, really asked, instead of just assuming." I looked at him. "You had time," I said. "I did," he admitted, "and I didn't use it." The honesty in his voice mattered more than anything else he could have said. Lauren took another step forward. "I called you a burden," she said again, her voice softer now, but steadier. "I don't expect you to forget that." I met her eyes. "I won't," I said. She nodded. "I understand." There was no argument, no attempt to soften it, just acceptance. And that mattered, more than an apology alone. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "I don't want things to go back to the way they were," she said. "I want them to be different." I considered that. Because change is easy to promise, but harder to live. "What does different look like to you?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately, which told me she was thinking, really thinking. "Respect," she said finally. "Not just in words, in how I treat you, in how I see you." I nodded slowly. "That's a start," I said. Ethan stepped closer. "Stay," he said. The word was simple, but it carried everything behind it. "This is your home too," he added. I looked around the room, the furniture, the space, the life they had built. Then I looked back at them. I won't stay, I said. The words landed quietly, but firmly. Lauren's face fell slightly. Ethan looked surprised. Why, he asked. Because I don't belong here the way you think I do, I replied. They both watched me, trying to understand. I came here because it felt like the right thing at the time, I continued. But I stayed longer than I should have. Not because I needed to, but because I didn't want to cause disruption. I paused, then added, That won't be my reason anymore. Lauren swallowed. So you're leaving? She asked. Yes, I said. When? Soon, I replied. This time, the word carried a different meaning. Not uncertainty, but decision. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. You don't have to go, he said. I'm not asking because I have to, I replied. I'm choosing to. There was a difference, and I needed them to understand it. I want to live somewhere that reflects who I am now, I said, not who I allowed myself to be seen as. Lauren nodded slowly. I understand, she said. And for the first time, it felt like she really did. Ethan exhaled. Will we still see you? He asked. I smiled faintly. Of course, I said. I'm not disappearing. I'm just setting boundaries. The words settled into the room. Not harsh, not cold, but necessary. Lauren stepped forward again. Can I ask you something? She said. You can, I replied. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. The question was softer now, not accusatory, just honest. I thought about it for a moment. Because I didn't need to, I said. They both waited. For years, I lived my life without needing recognition, I continued. I didn't see a reason to change that just because I moved into this house. Lauren nodded. That makes sense, she said quietly. And also, I think I wouldn't have understood it even if you had told me. I appreciated that honesty, because it was true. Ethan looked at me. I want to understand now, he said. I held his gaze. Then take your time, I replied. Understanding doesn't happen all at once. The room fell quiet again, but this time it was different. Not heavy, not tense, just open. A space where something new could begin, even if it wouldn't look the way it once did. I picked up my purse and moved toward the stairs. I'm going to rest, I said. Lauren nodded. Of course. Ethan stepped back. Good night, Mom, he said. I paused at the first step, then looked back at them. Good night, I replied. And as I walked upstairs, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything had been fixed, but because everything had been seen. And sometimes, that is where real change begins. What this story reminds us is something many people learn too late. A person's value is rarely visible on the surface. The quietest people in our lives often carry the deepest stories, the greatest sacrifices, and the kindest hearts. Yet we live in a world that judges quickly measures worth in convenience and confuses silence with weakness. Ryan was never just anything. She was never a burden. She was a builder of lives, a giver of second chances, a quiet force that changed the future of people she would never meet. But because she did not announce her worth, others assumed she had none. That is the danger of shallow judgment. It does not just hurt others, it blinds us to truth. There is also a deeper lesson about dignity. Ryan did not fight to prove herself. She did not argue, defend, or demand recognition. She allowed the truth to stand on its own, and when it did, it was stronger than any words she could have spoken. Real worth does not need to shout. It reveals itself in time. And perhaps the most important lesson is about how we treat the people closest to us. It is easy to be kind to strangers and respectful to those we admire, but true character is shown in how we treat those we think we already understand. The people in our homes, the ones who raised us, the ones who stay quiet. Those are the people we must look at again, more carefully, more gently. If this story touched you, I would truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been misunderstood or underestimated by someone close to you? Or maybe you've realized you judged someone too quickly. Share your story in the comments. Your voice might help someone else feel seen. And if you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Stories that remind us to look deeper, love better, and never underestimate the quiet strength of a human heart.